my name is Elaine Pendergrass, and I specialize in education and children's ministry. It's amazing how the two can come together and work so well, and also can provide challenges, because what we're doing with children each week when they're in our children's ministries is teaching them. And so it's important to know some things about teaching. Specifically, the special needs component can really make a difference in a classroom. The church where I serve now has one classroom that has about 4 or 5 children that are either have autism spectrum disorder, or have sensory issues, or are undiagnosed but are showing symptoms of certain things that show that they might have different learning ways than other children. So how do we deal with this? I know most of the people that I deal with in my ministry, and that you likely deal with in your ministry, are untrained when it comes to helping children with special needs. So I'd love to give you some tips and tricks, some ways that you can help the children in your ministry to be successful, whether they're average development or whether they have differences. So let's talk about that now. One of the most important things to do when children come to your ministry, especially if they are new children, is to have some sort of check-in system. Think about this at a school. If children were brought to a school and just dropped off, they wouldn't be allowed to stay. Parents have to stay and give all kinds of information, their social security number, their birth certificates, their everything, all of that contact information. But oftentimes in churches, a new child comes and we just take them in, not knowing any background information. Well, that really puts the church at risk. And it also makes it less possible for the child to have a successful day. So whether your church is large and has a fancy check-in system with name tags that print out and a computer-based program, or whether your church is so small that you only have a few children each week, it's really important to have some sort of a check-in system. You can save that information to use later. So when you check in children, one of the questions that should be asked, other than their name and their birth date and all those kinds of things, is, does your child have any special needs or allergies or medical concerns or anything that would help us for your child to be successful in the classroom? People are often wary to ask those questions. They're nervous. They think, oh, what if the child does have a learning difference? Or what if the child does have special needs? Some things are obvious if a child comes in and has a different way of walking, or is in a wheelchair, or has some other sort of obvious special need, but yet there are many special needs that are not obvious to the average person. So ask the question. The parent can choose, or the guardian can choose, to not give you information, but I find that most of the time when you ask the question overtly, in a loving, kind way with smiles, they'll give you the answer. Why does this matter? Well, it's not to single out a child, but it's so that the child can be successful in the classroom. The more information we have on children, the better we can provide for their needs. The better we can provide great learning environments for them. The more fun we can have, and the less likelihood there is for a child to have some sort of emergency when we're not able to help. Remember, when you're checking in children as well, to get the parents' contact information. Your church, again, may have some sort of a system where a number that correlates with a name tag is put on a screen, or something else. It may just be a church where you find that parent, but make sure you know what a parent or guardian looks like, but also gather their cell phone number. Keep in mind, too, that sometimes people in church services don't always keep their phone on, so you want to kind of have a backup method. If you decide to text a parent and don't hear from them, you can always make a run for the worship center or send someone on your behalf to get help. Hopefully, though, we won't even have to contact the parent while the child is in our care. And when the parent comes to pick up the child, we're able to give them a great report. So how can we make sure that great report happens? It all begins in the beginning. It's a very good place to start. Well, remember that the parents are the experts. Now, they might not be medical experts. They might not be doctors or have a PhD in whatever special need their child has, but they know what works for their child. When I babysat years ago, parents would tell me, the child likes to go to bed with the certain little blanket right by their face, or you can rub above her eyebrow and she'll fall asleep, or she really likes this kind of food, but you need to cut it up a certain way. Parents are experts in what their children need, so let's use them as such and get their input. What kinds of things should you ask parents? Let's say a parent comes in and you ask, oh, I'm so glad to see you today. What's your child's name? What's your name? Get the contact info, get the names of the children and the birth dates and all the fun things. And then you say, are there any special needs or medical concerns or allergies that we should be aware of? And let's say the parent says, yes, my child has autism, or has ASD, or has autism spectrum disorder. whatever they choose to call it. Then you say, okay, thanks for letting me know that. I'd love to ask a few more questions so we can make sure to provide your child with the best opportunity possible. So I might ask things like this, and this might be even as I'm taking the child to the classroom. What does your child love? What is your child into? They might say Legos. They might say Blues Clues back in the day, or Bluey. They might say, my child loves to draw. My child loves whatever it is. Find out what the child loves. What are they into? And think about what's available in your classrooms, or maybe you have it in a supply room or something else. This could be that you don't have the thing that the child's into. Maybe they're really into Disney characters and you don't have any in your space. Well, that's something you can make a note of maybe to gather later. You can also ask the parents, are there certain special words or special signs or things that you use with your child or your child uses with you? A lot of families, as you know, have different names for genitalia and things like that, but they also have other names. Like the child might be very upset, this particular child with autism, because the child wants I think the name in the movie years ago was a Wookiee, and the Wookiee was the name of the special blanket. Sometimes children have a special thing and they have a name, and if a child's asking for a Wookiee, I might go look for a Star Wars character if I don't know what the name is. So find out, are there special names you use? Does the child say something when he needs to go to the restroom, or she does? I've had grandparents tell me before that when that child with autism wants to use the restroom, he begins to pull his pants down. Well, not every volunteer in the classroom would know, oh, that child needs to use the restroom, but thankfully the parent told me. So find out, are there special names that they use for things? Are there things that we should be clued into as volunteers and child care directors or children's ministers? Are there certain symbols that they use? Maybe they use sign language, and if the child signs, this, they mean eat. So ask those kinds of things. What are the children into? What is the child into? What do they like? And then also, what are some special words, symbols, things that you use or call certain things that we might need to know in the classroom? You don't need a whole glossary of the vocabulary words they use at home, but things that might apply, like if they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they need to use the restroom, that sort of thing. If it's a grandparent that drops the child off, I often ask, what's your grandma name or what's your grandpa name? Because there are a plethora of names for grandparents, and we want to make sure we don't say grandma. They might not know who grandma is, but they might know who Nana is. Also, you want to ask, are there certain things I should be looking for or watching out for? If your child is getting upset, if your child is in danger. I have one child that's in my ministry, and this child looks very normal. She plays very normally. She's super sweet and huggy and loves to play with other children. But when I asked this question initially, when she first came to the church, the mom said, yes, she has a seizure disorder. I won't give the name or anything like that, but she has a seizure disorder. And I thought, okay, I've seen people have seizures, but in this particular child, I haven't. So I said, what does that look like? If your child were to have a seizure, what would I see? And she said, well, it's typically this particular seizure happens when she gets upset. I thought, okay, ding, ding, let's try to not get her upset. And then she said she would do this kind of action. I would be able to see it. And so then I know what to look for. And then I'll also express that to the volunteers in the classroom if I'm not there that day. Hey, look for this thing. If this child does this, she's probably having a seizure. So one of the things you ask parents and grandparents and guardians who drop off children, if the child has special needs, is what do I look for if your child is upset, or if your child is in danger, if your child has a medical issue? What do I look for? What should it look like? It's different in different children and different adults as well. So that's helpful to know. Also, what should I do? Some children have seizures and you just let them be and make sure that their heads are safe and they're good. Other children might have to take a medication. Of course, I want to let parents know if something like that happens. So I asked the parent, if I see blank, what should I do? And she pretty much said, just let her be, keep her safe, and come find me. And so that was the protocol. So ask what you can do to help if you see a problem arise. Think about younger children too. When we think about younger children, maybe of nursery age and the 1-year-old mark or so, we have children that have separation anxiety sometimes. And some parents are fantastic. They just drop them off and they'll be fine. They'll stop crying and they leave. I've also had other parents that stand outside the door and cry as I try to coax them away. So typically, if you see a child that upsets pretty easily, or if it is a child with special needs, I would ask the parent, when should I contact you? If blank happens, what would you want to be contacted for? So if the child is, very upset, do you want me to contact you? If the child cries more than 10 minutes, do you want me to contact you? I don't usually typically give the idea out to the parent, but I'll say, okay, I know your child's upset right now. We'll make sure everything's okay. But at some point, do you want us to contact you, or do you want to just try to for us to work it out? So ask those kinds of parents, when as a parent do you want to be contacted? A best practice, though, would be if the child is in any kind of physical danger, medical danger, you do want to contact the parent, even if they didn't say contact me. So we've gotten all this information on the kids, their birth date, their name, if they have medical issues or allergies or other sensory issues or special needs, whatever those things are. We've gathered that information. We've asked the parent, what does your child love? What are they into? We've asked the parent, what should I look for if there's a problem? We've also asked the parent, when should I contact you? We've also asked the parent, what are the special words or phrases or signs that you use with your particular child so we can use the right terms? The next thing we want to do is make sure we capture that information. So as I mentioned, if you have a fancy system that allows children to be checked in on computers and things like that, a lot of this can be logged, although there's not necessarily a place. You probably have to add some notes or something about special things about the child other than birth date, medical concerns, things like that. But once you add those things, once you get that information down, I encourage you not just to keep that information on a computer, but to keep that information in whatever classroom that child is assigned to. Let's say they go to a children's church and a Sunday school classroom. You want to have that information both places, because volunteers typically, at most of the churches where I've served, are not week to week. You have different volunteers, and you want those volunteers to have access to that information. Also, be sure to alert your volunteers, hey, you have some kids that have special needs in here. This is so-and-so. So-and-so loves Lego. So if he gets upset, bust out the Lego box. It's going to help. Or this child really loves books. So if this child gets upset, bring some books and start to read. Or this child is really upset by whatever. So talk to that. Once you know that information and you have that information captured, keep the information in a room where you can have all that together and provide it to your people who need help with the children. I should have said this earlier, right after the part where I said, what is your child into? I might also ask, what does your child have an aversion to? That might be certain children have issues with sound being too loud. You often see it, maybe they're undiagnosed, but as soon as the music comes on loudly, they do this. Or if something scares them, they do this. So what do the children have aversions to? It's common in certain special needs children and adults to have issues with sound, issues with lights, issues with chaos, a feel of chaos in the classroom. There might be certain things that really agitate them, like if a balloon were to pop or something like that. So you also want to know what agitates, what bothers children. Because we start singing a song and a child in the corner starts crying, I'm going to go, what is that? But if I already know that child has an aversion to singing, I might be able to have another volunteer take the child out for a little walk while we do songs, and then the child can come back. So also ask, what is the aversion? What are the things that bother your child? So what are some things we can have in the classroom to help these kids with special needs so that they can cope well? Well, just as adults have things that they need to do, you see, even as I'm talking today, I move my feet a little bit. I've had people that, pat their leg the whole time. We all have kind of coping mechanisms, and children can do the same. Oftentimes they develop their own coping mechanisms, like they might chew on their shirt, they might twirl their hair, or whatever that is. But kids with special needs, if we can provide some tools in the classroom for them, it can really help them to self-soothe and to calm themselves when they're upset. Think about, we call them often sensory tools, or we might call them fidget tools and things like that. A few years ago, it was popular to have those little things you could hold on your thumb and they would spin around, just spinners, and kids loved them. Those kinds of things. Or think about like balls that you can squeeze and stuff pops out, or kind of a stress ball. Those kinds of things can be really good for kids that have special needs, and even kids that don't have special needs, because it gives them something to do with their hands. So if a child is getting agitated or has trouble sitting during a story time, or is getting upset about something, it can help kind of take that information that's frustrating them and put it into their hands, so they're able to take out some frustration or do some movement there, and it takes the focus off the problem and puts it onto something else. So I encourage you to have a box or a bag or something in each classroom that has fidget toys and sensory balls. And, you can get like these caterpillar things that have all these different parts. And when you move them, they make fun noises and things like that, but it's not too distracting. Keep some things like that in a classroom. And if you see that there's a child that's having some sensory issues, or if you know that a parent tells you, for example, oh, my child loves squishies. I've had parents tell me that my child loves squishies, and the child isn't diagnosed with anything. But I even know, ding, ding, when that child's upset, if I have a squishy in the classroom, I might be able to help solve the problem. Another thing you might want to provide for special needs children and for others that might just be having a rough day is a quiet place to cool down. When I was teaching in the classroom years ago, we had a timeout spot. I've worked, years and years ago, it would have been people said, go to the corner, right? We have certain things that we would say for children as sort of a disciplinary piece of, you're in trouble, go away. And that's not so much how we want to use this in this case. But when I say a quiet spot or a time to think or whatever, it's just a place for a child to retreat, to kind of gather himself or herself. It can be a cozy place. I've heard of schools using large dog beds for children where they can kind of go and just snuggle up and be cozy for a minute. I've heard of people using tables that the children can go under. Different things like that, but to have a designated place in the room where if a child is having trouble and needs to calm down or needs to have a little bit of quiet space, provide a place in the room, and that can be really effective for children with special needs. Another thing to think about in a classroom is you might have that one child or those two children in the classroom who love to caretake. These are typically, I've seen it as the mamas in the classroom. They're the ones that like to play with babies and things like that, or they're the ones that are very helpful. They always want to, hey, who wants to help me? Boom, their hand goes up. They want to help do something. Those children can often be great buddies for kids that have special needs. So they don't have any training in this necessarily, but you just go up to that child and say, hey, I would love for you to be a helper today. Would you mind being a buddy with so-and-so? She just needs a buddy with her, and you can just make sure she's happy and has what she needs. And if she needs help, would you let me know so that we can both be helpers for her? And that can really help. So having a buddy, same gender is great. If it's different gender, that probably could work just fine too, depending on the personalities of the children. So find your little helpers in the classroom and offer to have them as buddies, and offer the children to offer the opportunity to be a buddy, and offer the opportunity for them to even learn how to develop empathy and helpfulness and things like that as they work with children with special needs. Another helpful thing in a classroom that has children with special needs is another adult. You might have a 2-adult rule. Most children's ministry classrooms do, where it's two adults that are in the same classroom. But when you have 2 adults and you're, let's say, in a preschool classroom, you might need another set of hands for those children that do have special needs, or those children that have not been to school yet and they don't know how to sit down and listen to a Bible story. So having a third set of hands can be really helpful too. In fact, if you can find people in your church that are teachers, or that are paraprofessionals, or that work specifically with special needs children, or that are occupational therapists or speech therapists, people like that specialize in working with people that have special needs, those people can be your token helpers. Now, they might not want to be in a classroom every Sunday, but they might be willing to come and observe and give you ideas of how to work with the child. So take advantage of that. Ask the people that have the knowledge, that went to school for it, that have training in how to work with these kids, and ask for their ideas. Hey, what have you seen work with this child that has this thing going on? Or, hey, would you be willing to come observe this for me? And that sort of thing. They might even be willing to jump in once a month and be an assistant or be a helper in the classroom. Some churches even have a system where there's an assigned buddy or an assigned helper with each child that needs a helper. So that person sees that person on Sunday. I've worked in churches that do this as well, where they meet their buddy and they stay with them wherever they go in the church that day. That can work out well as well. Remember earlier when we talked about having those items for kids in the classroom of what are they into? Well, if you realize, as I said before, to make a mental note of things that you don't have that the children are into, go find those things. It might be that you have those things at home. It might be that you could go to Goodwill and get books on a certain topic, let's say. Let's say we have a kid that's really into science. Maybe you could find some books about astronauts and planets and plants and things like that for that child, and just have them handy for the child when the child comes in. So it's a place where, hey, this person knows me and they know what I like. You can grab some sensory toys at, dollar stores. You can order them from online and things like that as well. But have those tools in place. And if you don't have those tools in place, find them. In fact, if there's something at home that the child loves that you could have a duplicate of at church, that could be really handy for you. I've had children that were really into Disney characters, that we might have a few Disney characters around that they can hold. I've had children that were really into other cartoon characters that they want to have access to. I've had children that are into certain books. And so when I know those things, once I've asked the parents, the experts, those things, I try to get them and have them in the classroom. Also be mindful of the setup of the classroom. If you have a whole lot of lights on the ceiling, those fluorescent lights that many of us grew up with in school, oftentimes those can be things that are distracting or bothersome to children with special needs. So if there's a way to put a few lamps in the classroom, kind of lighten the load a little bit, and make it a little bit more child-friendly as far as not too bright, that can be great. Also, if the colors are super bright, sometimes that can be very stimulating, so just softening the colors a bit. Sometimes it's a matter of having too much stuff out, too many toys, too many things. You might want to just pull out what you're working on that day or what applies to the lesson. So keep that in mind as well, because too much chaos, too much light, too loud music can be very bothersome to children with special needs, and also some children who just like to be quiet and like to be still and like to not have big lights. What about when the parents come to pick up their child? This can be one of the roughest times for parents and for guardians that I see in children's ministry. They tend to be fairly happy to drop their children off. They tend to feel pretty comfortable with that. But when they come back, I've had parents in tears before, and I've had parents that I hear through the grapevine that are upset because of the way a volunteer described the behavior of their child when they picked them up. And that to me is very upsetting for several reasons. One of them is because this is their child's baby. So if I were to I'll give you an example with my child. When he was young, he was 2 in the 2-year-old classroom, and I was the director of the preschool and the children's director at the church. So when I came to pick him up one day, this particular teacher handled it very well, but she told me he was 2. He had been hitting. Now I know that's age appropriate for that age, but we didn't allow violence at our home at all. And so it was very upsetting to me that, I'm sort of her boss and I love her, but she's telling me my kid did this and he's 2 and whatever. It was very upsetting to me. And that was an irregularity for me. So imagine if you had a child with special needs and every time you pick up that child, they say, oh, he just screamed and cried, or oh, he just did this or that, or oh, she just did this or that. Imagine how disheartening that is for a parent. Parents love their children. Their children are their babies, and they recognize that their children do wrong, but we can help with this. So the classic way when a parent picks up a child, you learn in school when you're an educator, is the sandwich approach or the Oreo approach, which means you want to give something good, what the problem was, and something good again. So they come in hearing, yay, I love this kid. And then, oh, we had some trouble here. And then, yay, I love this kid. And so let me give you an example of that. One week I had a child with sensory issues who also was born with fetal alcohol syndrome. So you can imagine the things that this child is dealing with that I can't see, because on the outside he looks very average, very, developmentally as he should be at that age. But internally, there's some stuff going on that I was aware of, but I can't see it. So this particular day, this child had a lot of issues, was kicking, was hitting, was trying to knock things over and smiling the whole time. And it was frustrating for me as the caretaker in the classroom, partly because I'm an educator. I should know how to help it. I have a parent, all the things, right? But instead of guilting myself through that, I tried to empathize with the child and think, oh, I don't know what he's going through. At the same time, upon pickup, I want to make sure that the parent knows what happened, but I also want to make sure that the parent knows that the child is loved and welcome back next time. So I said something like this: "Hi, Dad. So good to see you. I hope you really enjoyed worship. I've so enjoyed having your son today in class. He is so funny. He loves to laugh and make people laugh, and we just love that about him. Today, though, he laughed a little too much because he was making himself crack up from kicking and hitting and pushing things over. And so we had a little trouble today with those things. So I would love for you to talk about that with him at home. And then next week when he comes back, we'll just expect a great week and we'll look forward to having him again. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day." You see, that was short. It was sweet. It told what happened, and he left thinking, oh, he's welcome back. And so use the sandwich approach. Sandwich, good, rough, good, or the Oreo approach. Good, rough, good, whatever that looks like for you, and share that information with the parents so they know what happens. You're telling them reality, but you're doing it in such a way that they know that you love their child, and they know that their child is welcome back next week. Think about this. We have the privilege of working with children each week. If you work in children's ministry, if you work in a classroom, let's say any type of a classroom, we have the privilege of taking care of these children. It may be an hour of stress. It may be an hour of, getting your makeup and hair ready, and then you sweat the entire time. But you know what? By working with these children, you're loving on the children. You're helping them know that church is a fun, safe, loving place. You're also helping the family because you're telling the family, hey, go enjoy worship. We've got this. We're going to take good care of your child, and we care so deeply about your child. We're going to keep them safe and do what makes them happy or do what soothes them when they're upset. And you're also serving God in the process. So you're serving children, you're serving families, and you're serving God. What better thing to do? So let's do this together. When you have struggles, ask for help. Talk to your children's director. Talk to your special needs teachers, your occupational therapist. Read books. And if I can be of help in that, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Please like or comment on this video, and I'd love to reach out and hear more about it and help you in the future.